So this is a great game coming up on Wednesday night, BR and Brockton. Obviously a once in a lifetime moment for these students and coaches. But there are those traditionalists that say Thanksgiving football should be on Thanksgiving Day around 10 a.m. and at one of two places. The MIAA has caught a lot of flack for the playoffs, which we'll get to in just a second. But when it comes to Thanksgiving football at a place like Fenway Park, what do you say to those people that think that, you know what, there's only one place that this should be played?
So I want to make a statement sort of about Thanksgiving Day football in Massachusetts in particular, in New England. And I think you know this, but I don't know if people in New England really think about it. We're almost the only place in the country that does Thanksgiving Day football. Like I've done this story in the Patriots locker room over the years. And you talk to a guy from Texas, you talk to a guy from Ohio, you talk to Florida and California guys where football is life and death in a lot of ways. They look at you like you have three heads when you ask them about Thanksgiving Day football. So to me, the statement is this: Thanksgiving Day football is not necessarily about where it is or even when it is. That game has so much history for your school, for your towns. I mean, they could play it in the backyard and in a parking lot, I think. So to me, the people that want to criticize that, well, it should be at Bridgewater Arena, or it should be at Marciano Stadium in Brockton. This is ridiculous. Yeah, well, go to Fenway Park and watch those teams play at Fenway Park with all the history of that. So again, I think the other criticism is, well, with the new playoff format, we'll talk about this later, it's kind of rendered the Thanksgiving Day meaningless. No, it's rendered it a little less meaningful in some games where a trip to the state championship might be on the line. But again, my statement is that Thanksgiving Day football is meaningful in itself. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I do. When it comes to high school football, a lot of these players, don't forget, if they are seniors, in some cases, this is the final time they're going to put on pads. Now, granted, some of them could move on to Division 1, 2, or 3 college football, which is great to hear. But for some of these players, this is it. And, especially for Bridgewater Rainham, which we'll talk about in a little bit, a lot of these players have played since youth league in Rainham and Bridgewater since fourth and fifth grade. I think the opportunity just to kind of go out there with your teammates and everybody watching, they can be playing this game, you know, in California, just as long as I think as you have that team aspect and those people watching you, there's a way to watch it at Fenway Park. We're going to have the game on replay on BTV and BCA. So there are ways to watch this team play the Brockton Boxers. And, there is tradition, yes, with playing these games at BR and Brockton, but sometimes traditions can change a little bit and change for the better.
I'm going to amend one thing you said. You said a lot of these kids won't go on to play college football. I forget the numbers. I think it's 75 to 80%
Oh,
won't
wow.
go on to play college football. So think about that. So the chance to play at Fenway Park, whether you're a kid that is going to play college football, and even that small percentile from Massachusetts who might have a shot at playing major college football or a chance to play in the pros, and we've had a lot of them. The chance to play at Fenway is special. Again, when you think about the history of Fenway, if people don't know about the history of football at Fenway, it goes back a long way. And if you've never been to a football game at Fenway since they brought it back, it's really cool because everybody that grew up in New England has been to Fenway, has had some type of magical experience. I don't know anybody that's ever said, I hate Fenway, rip it down. They might rip it down for other reasons, but there aren't a lot of places like that. So if you're a kid, again, that's not going to go on and play college and you get a chance to play football at Fenway Park, I don't think I'm passing that up.
And there's, I think, 6 Super Bowls, maybe 8 Super Bowls coming up at Gillette Stadium for BR and Brockton. Their Super
Right.
Bowl hopes are dashed. Guess what? This is their Super Bowl coming up.
Nice bonus.
Yeah.
Nice bonus. They'd much rather be playing at Gillette. I'm with you, but the chance to play at Fenway is a nice bonus.
Another aspect of this game is the fact that Peter Colombo is going to be coaching his final game for the Brockton Boxers. This brings an end to quite the legacy for the Colombo family, going back to Armin's days, bringing the Brockton Boxers into national prominence. We've seen Dan Bjorn step aside a couple of years ago. We saw Lou Silva step aside. I think the North Attleboro head coach stepped aside at the end of last year, beginning this year, somewhere around there. It seems like we're starting to see kind of that changeover from the older blood to kind of this newer generation.
Mhm.
And what do you expect to see from high school football as we go into the future with this newer blood coming in?
It's a great question, and I think we could take this in a lot of different ways, but let's look at the NFL. You've got all these young breed analytics coaches, let's call them, right? Going for it on fourth down a lot more. We've seen it. Um, Quite honestly, I think the big Achilles heel for them is being inexperienced. They don't know how to manage the clock at the end of a game. Most of them don't. Most of them, pee their pants in situations because they're not ready for a situation. Look, people criticize Belichick. They say the game's passed him by. But tell me when you think a game ended and you said Belichick wasn't prepared for that situation. It's almost unheard of. So will that happen in high school with these new coaches? Um, you and I talked before about how they're growing up together, some of these kids with the coaches, and what's that like? I think the coaches are learning on the job. So I don't have an answer for you about how it is going to change. I think it will change. I think a lot of things won't change. To me, being a football guy, I mean, I played at Stonehill College and played flag football after that and played 1 year of semi-pro, and I had no delusions of grandeur. At 5'8 3/4, I wasn't going to go to the NFL, but I loved the game and I understood the game, and I was a captain of my college team and I ran some defenses. And football to me is what I loved about it is at any level, it really comes down to, do you like taking your face and stick it in that guy's chest? And do you like enjoy that feeling? That little pain feeling of it. It's smash mouth. It's all the things they say. And it's really your will against another guy's will. And no, that's common in a lot of sports. I think it's more common in football. So I think football is still the same game it's always been at any level. And I would hope it's not going to change with younger coaches, because I think the good coaches know that you build a team from the inside out at any level.
And we talked before this interview about your relationship with not just Dan Biron, but also Peter Colombo. I believe you're going to have a story coming up on the high school football special on Thanksgiving Day. And if you can just share some of what you're going to share coming up on the show on Thanksgiving morning, because we talked and there were some things that I was very surprised about. I thought I knew a lot about Peter Colombo and my mind was blown.
Well, let me start with Danny Buron. So Danny and I have been friends for a long time, back to our college days. His brother Dave was a teammate of mine at Stonehill College, and I got to know Dan then. And I think everybody in Bridgewater Raynham knows Dan's history, but maybe you don't. Like, I thought I knew the whole Colombo history, and I, from a conversation with Peter Colombo the other day, learned some things that I'll tell you in a few minutes that blew me away. But take a good look at Dan and do some research. And I think some of these guys on this team, were uh, were able to interact with Dan before he retired as football coach, before he retired as athletic director. But Danny was a phenomenal football player himself, not only at Bridgewater Raynham, but also at Holy Cross. I mean, Danny was a special football player. He really was. And I think he was one of those unique guys who was able to translate his passion and knowledge and love for the game into his teams, into his kids. I mean, in my opinion, in Dan's history with his finger on the Bridgewater Raynham program, and this is the ultimate compliment, in my opinion, is that any team that came to play Bridgewater Raynham, especially in the playoffs when they weren't league rivals, you knew you had to be prepared for Bridgewater Raynham. You knew you had a dogfight on your hands. And that was common with Brockton too. So I think Danny, do your homework. And here's a challenge I would give to the Bridgewater Raynham players. Before you play this last game, maybe the last time you ever wear a football uniform, do two things. Wake up in the morning and research Jerry Callahan's article in the Boston Herald and read it in the morning. It still stands the test of time. It was written almost 25, 30 years ago, I think, about you being a senior and playing in your last game. It's an amazing, amazing story. And do a little research on the Colombos and look across the field and realize when you're playing against Peter Colombo, you connect a few dots and you have a connection to Rocky Marciano and Marvin Hagler and all the history of Brockton, because that's what the Colombos are. So there's a lot of history in this game, and Peter Colombo is going to be the end of a legacy that is an amazing legacy, one of the most amazing legacies in the history of Massachusetts schoolboy sports. Briefly, again, I could go on and on. This will be in the feature. And by the way, our features will be on nine, our specials on Thanksgiving Day will be 9:30 in the morning before all the games start. But then we know there's a lot of people that care about football that are going to games and they won't see it then. So at 10:30 at night, we'll be recapping a lot of the games, but I'm going to rerun the Colombo feature because it's about Peter's dad, Armand, and, and the family. And for people that don't know the history, Armin Colombo was the winningest coach in Massachusetts high school history when he retired. And he stuck around for a long time on the sidelines still with his son as Peter took over. But this Sunday is going to mark a 53-year run as when it was a Colombo on the sidelines. And now it's not going to be that way anymore. And in the piece, you'll see that there are some grandkids that love football, and it may happen again, but continuously it's going to stop after this year. But Armand went to Brockton High School, led them to a championship, went to Stonehill College, went to Archbishop Williams and in 9 years, won 3 Class D championships, 55 wins, and then came back to Brockton. And when he came back to Brockton, it was 1968, and they went 3-6. They had a losing season that first year, but a lot happened in that next year. The new Brockton High School was built. Rocky Marciano died. And by the way, again, if you don't know the history, the Colombos and Marcianos are tied in so many ways, but Armand married Rocky Marciano's sister. Armand has passed away. Rocky passed away in 68. Peter told his team, we're going to dedicate this season to Rocky. And what you guys need to understand about Rocky, do your homework. And they did. And a lot of them grew up idolizing Rocky and knew that he was an undefeated heavyweight champ. We're not going to lose. And they didn't. They went 9-0 and won the state championship. But the Mrs. Colombo, I forget her first name, I think it's Becky, Peter's mom, Armand's wife, Rocky's sister, is still alive. She's 91. Peter told me the other day, she came to all the games this year. She sat with Peter and watched film. Imagine all the film she's watched over the years. So again, I could go on and on. I've worked hard to create a piece that pays tribute to the Colombo legacy. I'm going to tweet them all out afterwards too. I hope people in your area and in Bridgewater Raynham get to watch it and see it and go find it. But again, if you're a player, if you're a fan, walk across that field at the end of that game and shake Peter Colombo's hand. And he's a part of history, a long history in this state and in your region.
I really hope people watch this show coming up 9:30 on Thanksgiving morning. There's no excuse not to watch because we are played on Thanksgiving Eve. But
well, here's what you can do. If you're going to a game,
Mhm.
Here's a thought. You can download the Boston 25 app and you can put your headphones on and it's 9:30. You still got half an hour to kickoff. You can watch the Colombo piece in the show. And I got a bunch of other features in there on the Hasselbecks, on James Tellier, who's a quarterback from my hometown at Braintree, who's a college football prospect who had cancer and didn't even think he was going to play his senior year and came back from it. And I got another one from Sam Carpenter, who's probably the best kicker in the state. And he's going to Indiana next year and he's playing in Foxborough. And Foxborough still has a chance this weekend, as you're in my conversation, to go to the Super Bowl. And they didn't expect it. They were a 6-4, a 4-6 team coming into the playoffs. And they're one of the last 16 teams standing, or 32 teams standing in these games.
Yeah, 60 going to the Super Bowl. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just hope people really pay attention to the past 5 or so minutes of this conversation, just because everything you said about Peter Colombo, it's enough to kind of give you a little bit of a chill. So we talked a lot about the past. I want to talk about the current BR Trojans. Lou Pacheco is in his second year as BR head coach. Quarterback Declan Byrne and running back Dawson DeBose also in their second year as real game changers. From what you've seen at some of the different high schools across the state, is there any positives that BR fans can take knowing that a coach and the core group of players are kind of learning this game together?
I think what they can take is years from now. I don't know Coach Pacheco. I haven't met him, but I will. I can guarantee you he'll say something along these lines. And the kids you just mentioned, the seniors will say the same things over the years. I bet you Coach Pacheco says, those are my guys. When I started, I learned more from them than they learned from me, I'm guessing. And then you talk to them guys and they say, no way. We learned a lot from Coach Pacheco because, as you talked about, they're both learning together along the way. And you don't forget those relationships. You don't forget those things. And I'm working on this Hasselbeck feature now, and Don Hasselbeck, who played for the Patriots, who's a grandfather now, and his son Matt are coaching with Matt's son and Don's grandson Henry, who's the quarterback. And I was just re-listening to the interviews this morning, and both Don and Matt said they're enjoying this so much because of the life lessons that they hope they're teaching these kids. And they, you know, consider Xaverian a very, very special place because they're very guys that are very devout in their faith, and it's a Catholic school, and they were part of the history of Xaverian now. So to have Henry there, who transferred over and came to Xaverian and is now a part of it, it's really cool to do that. So to answer your question directly about a young coach and the young kids, I think it's more about what they're going to learn about each other and the life lessons they're going to learn together, as well as the football on the field.